She had always loved music, but it had never been something that brought her attention or praise. From the time she was a little girl, she would spend hours sitting by the window, watching the world outside, while her fingers traced the keys of the old piano in her living room. The piano was not new or fancy, but it held a kind of magic for her. She could make it sing, cry, and laugh, even when the rest of her life felt ordinary and quiet. Most people around her barely noticed. Her friends were busy with sports, parties, and social media, and her family thought of her playing as just a hobby, something to fill time rather than a path to anything important. Every day after school, she would sit down at the piano. At first, she played simple melodies she had learned from books or small lessons. Slowly, she began experimenting, finding new ways to string the notes together. Music became her secret world, a place where no one judged her or expected anything. When she played, she felt free, as if the notes carried away her worries and fears. She practiced quietly, never thinking about performing in public or impressing anyone. The piano was her comfort, her friend, her escape. She remembered the first time she realized music could express emotions she could not put into words. She had been feeling lonely and uncertain about her place in the world. She sat down at the piano, hesitant at first, unsure if she could play anything that mattered. Then her fingers moved on their own, almost guided by some unseen force. And the sounds that came out seemed to speak for her heart. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the music swelled, expressing sadness, hope, and longing all at once. In that moment, she understood that music was more than just notes. It was a way to communicate without needing anyone else to understand every word. Despite this deep love for music, she remained invisible in most social settings. At school, she was quiet and kept to herself, often sitting at the back of the classroom, observing rather than participating. Her classmates were loud and confident, and she sometimes felt like an outsider. They would talk about their weekend plans, their achievements, or the latest trends, while she quietly noted the rhythm of their voices or the melodies in her mind. It wasn't that she didn't want to join in it. It was just that she never felt her voice could match the others. Music was where she felt her true voice existed. Her family loved her, of course, but they were practical and busy with their own lives. They did not see the significance of her quiet dedication. To them, the piano was a pastime, something she did when she had nothing better to do. They encouraged her to focus on school, on practical skills, and on finding a steady path. She would smile and nod, understanding their concern, but she could not give up her music. Every day she'll return to the piano, even if only for a few minutes. To feel the calm it brought, she had taken small lessons when she was younger, but she was mostly she learned by listening to recordings, by experimenting with chords, and by mimicking melodies she heard on the radio or at concerts. Her style was unique, formed from fragments of other songs and her own imagination. She did not play for applause or recognition. She played because the music was a part of her. The piano had a way of bringing her inner world into the open, making the invisible visible. Sometimes she would imagine what it would be like if someone truly listened to her music, not just hearing the notes, but feeling the emotions behind them. She wondered if people would see her differently if they could understand what she poured into each key, each chord, each pause. But these were just thoughts she kept to herself. Life had a way of moving quickly. She often felt that no one had time to notice the quiet ones. Her daily routine was simple: school, homework, meals, and music. The piano sat in the corner of the living room, a constant presence. She would practice for an hour or two each day, sometimes more if she lost track of time. Her fingers grew strong and agile, capable of moving quickly across the keys, yet gentle enough to coax soft, delicate notes. Each piece she learned became part of her memory. Not just her hands, but her mind and heart remembering the rhythm, the emotion, the story behind it. Occasionally, she would play for her family and they would listen politely. Her parents would smile, and her younger sibling would clap enthusiastically, but it never felt like anyone truly understood her. They saw the surface, the pretty sounds, the effort, but not the depth. She accepted this, knowing that not everyone needed to understand. Music was not about approval. It was about honesty, about speaking without words. In school, she had a small circle of friends, but even they did not know the extent of her talent. They saw her as shy, reserved, and perhaps a little unusual. She did not mind. It allowed her to continue in her own world, free from expectations. She sometimes brought her music to school events, playing quietly in the background while others were busy with loud activities. A few students would notice and compliment her, but most would walk by, distracted. She had grown used to this. Her music was hers, first and foremost. She had dreams, small and cautious ones. She imagined playing for a larger audience one day, maybe in a small concert hall, maybe even recording her music. But these dreams were gentle, not loud or demanding. She did not feel ready to step into the spotlight. She was content with her private world, the piano, and the melodies she created. One afternoon, everything began to shift. She had been invited to a small gathering at a community center. It was a casual event, nothing formal, and the organizers asked if she could play something simple on the piano. They did not expect anything extraordinary, just a pleasant background melody. She hesitated, unsure if she should go. Public attention had always been uncomfortable for her, but something inside nudged her forward. She agreed, thinking that it would be a small, harmless experience. As she walked into the room, she felt a familiar, nervous flutter in her stomach. The piano waited in the corner, polished and shining under the lights. People were chatting, not paying much attention to her. She felt invisible, as she often did, and for a moment, she wondered if she should turn back. But then she reminded herself that music had always been her safe place, her friend. She could rely on it to carry her through. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys. The room seemed larger than it actually was, filled with murmurs and movement. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second, and let herself settle. This was not about impressing anyone, she told herself. This was about honesty. She let her fingers find the first notes, soft and deliberate, simple and familiar. At first, the tune was ordinary, just as they had requested. People continued talking, sipping their drinks, and moving around. She felt herself relax, the initial tension melting away. The piano felt warm beneath her hands, welcoming and familiar. She allowed herself to imagine the melody growing, expanding, becoming more than just notes on a page. She did not yet know that this simple decision to play at that moment would become a turning point. The world outside the room continued as always, unaware of the quiet magic about to unfold. For her, the music was not a performance yet. It was an offering, a whisper from her soul to anyone willing to hear. She could not anticipate the effect it would have, the astonishment it would stir, the eyes it would open as she began to play. Her hands moving naturally, the music felt alive. It flowed not just from her fingers, but from her heart, carrying every bit of emotion she had ever felt. The melody started simple as they had asked, but gradually it grew richer, more expressive. Notes intertwined, danced, and lingered in the air. She was no longer just playing a tune, she was telling a story, revealing herself in ways words never could. For a long time, she had played in solitude, and this was no different in essence. But now, there were witnesses. People began to notice the change in the music. Conversations paused. Drinks were forgotten. The room gradually fell into a hushed attention. She was still unaware of the effect she was having, completely absorbed in the music, letting it guide her as it had guided her countless times before, in that quiet corner of the community center. A transformation began, not just in her, but in those listening. They would not yet understand it fully, but something remarkable was emerging. This simple girl, known for being quiet and ordinary, was about to reveal a side of herself that few had seen, and no one would soon forget. And so, the first part of her journey unfolded. A story of hidden talent, quiet dedication, and the beginning of a moment that would change everything. The piano waited patiently, the notes ready to soar, and she sat. Unaware of the astonishment she was about to create, she had never performed in front of a crowd before. And as she sat at the piano in the community center, the excitement of the room slowly gave way to a nervous tension in her chest. People were milling about, chatting, laughing, She felt the weight of their attention, even if they were not yet looking directly at her. She had been invited casually to play with the suggestion to keep it simple, and for a moment she questioned whether she could meet even that expectation. The simplicity of the request seemed easy enough, yet the very thought of others judging her, even in a small way, made her fingers hesitate above the keys as she took a deep breath. She remembered all the hours she had spent at home, alone with the piano. She thought of the nights when she would practice until her fingers ached, the moments when she would stop, only to listen to the echo of her own music filling the room. She realized that all those hours had prepared her for this moment, though it did not erase the nervous flutter she felt now. It was different to play in private, where mistakes mattered only to her, than to play in front of others. Even if it was a small crowd, she glanced around, taking in the room. People were chatting and moving, unaware of the quiet tension building within her. She noticed a few faces that seemed to pay attention, nodding politely, but most were distracted. She felt small in the space, an ordinary girl in a sea of ordinary people, with her extraordinary talent still hidden beneath her quiet exterior. She closed her eyes briefly, reminding herself that the piano was her safe place. The notes were there for her alone, ready to speak the words she could not. The first notes came softly, almost hesitantly. She played the simple tune they had asked for, allowing it to flow gently. The music was calm, unobtrusive, like a quiet whisper in the background. For a few moments, nothing remarkable happened. People continued talking, sipping their drinks, unaware of the story slowly forming in the notes she played. She felt a twinge of disappointment, wondering if she would ever be able to capture their attention. As she continued, something shifted. Her fingers began to move more confidently, tracing the melody she had carried in her mind for years. She let herself add subtle variations, small flourishes that brought the music to life. The tune was no longer just simple, it was growing, evolving, becoming more expressive. She felt a warmth spreading through her as the music began to reflect her own emotions. The years of quiet practice and longing, the hidden depths of her heart. The people in the room slowly began to notice. Conversations started to fade as ears turned toward the piano. Someone paused mid-step, drink in hand, listening. Another tilted their head, intrigued by the unexpected beauty in what had seemed like a casual, simple tune. The shift was subtle at first, barely perceptible, but she could sense it. The room was becoming quiet, attentive, and for the first time, she felt the possibility of connection through her music. A wave of doubt threatened to break her concentration. What if she made a mistake? What if people did not like what they heard? Her hands trembled slightly. But she reminded herself of all the times she had practiced in solitude, all the nights spent coaxing emotion from the keys. She let the music guide her, trusting in the voice she had cultivated over so many years. The fear did not disappear, but it became a part of the experience, tension that made the notes feel more alive. Slowly, she began to let the tune expand. She added gentle chords beneath the melody, creating a richer sound. She played with dynamics, soft and loud, slow and fast, exploring the range of the piano she had known so well. Each note carried a piece of her feelings, her dreams, her doubts. She realized she was telling a story through the music, one that had always existed inside her, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The audience, though small and casual, started to feel the emotion in her performance. Heads turned, eyes widened, and whispers ceased. People were drawn into the music, sensing something profound in the simplicity of her playing. It was as if the piano itself were speaking, revealing the depth of a life lived quietly, unnoticed, yet full of feeling. She could feel the room's energy change, a quiet recognition of the talent that had been hiding in plain sight. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the realization that she could reach others through her music. She felt a connection she had never experienced before, a bond between herself and the listeners, even if they did not yet understand fully. The music flowed freely, each note an extension of her being. The room, once casual and distracted, now held its breath. Captivated by the unfolding story as she played, memories of her solitary practice sessions came to mind. She remembered The nights when she had doubted herself, the times when her fingers stumbled over difficult passages, the moments of frustration and tears. All of it had led to this point, and suddenly those struggles felt meaningful. They had shaped her, honed her skill, and deepened her expression. Each challenge she had faced in private was now transforming into something visible and powerful in public. Despite the growing admiration from the audience, self-doubt still lingered. She questioned whether she deserved the attention, whether she could maintain the performance, whether she was ready for anyone to see her in this light. She felt the weight of expectation, even self-imposed, pressing on her, but she knew she could not stop. The music demanded to continue, and she surrendered to it. Letting the piano guide her fingers and heart, gradually the tune she had started with as simple began to transform. She added emotional depth, variations, in rhythm, subtle pauses that allowed the music to breathe. The melody sang of hope, sadness, longing, and joy, intertwining into a tapestry of feeling. She played not for approval, not for praise, but because she could not do otherwise. The music was her voice, and now, for the first time, it was being heard by others in a meaningful way. The audience responded in small, almost imperceptible ways at first. A hand lifted slightly, a head tilted, eyes glimmered with surprise. The murmurs of conversation faded into silence. People began to lean in, drawn by the unexpected depth and emotion emanating from the piano. They could feel the story, even if they did not know its words. The girl at the piano was no longer invisible. She was commanding attention with every note. As the performance continued, she became more confident. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier transformed into a quiet determination. She realized that her music could bridge the gap between herself and the world, that her private expression could touch others in ways she had only dreamed of. The room became a shared space where the boundaries between performer and listener blurred. Each note resonated with the hearts of those present, creating an unspoken understanding and appreciation. In that moment, she learned something important. That doubt was not the enemy, but a companion in the journey. It made her aware, attentive, and focused, and it had given her the courage to continue despite uncertainty. She understood that fear and excitement could coexist, and that the choice to act in spite of doubt was what allowed her true talent to shine. The simple tune had become a vessel for something far greater than anyone had anticipated by the time. She reached the middle of her performance. The room was fully attentive. People were no longer chatting or moving about, were listening, completely absorbed in the music. Even those who had initially dismissed her as shy or ordinary could not look away. She was revealing a part of herself that had always been hidden, and the audience was responding with awe and admiration. Her quiet life, filled with secret hours of practice and dedication, had led to this unexpected moment of recognition. As she played the final notes of the first piece, she felt a surge of emotion. The room was silent, the listeners holding their breath as the last chord lingered in the air. She realized that she had done something remarkable, not because she sought praise, but because she had stayed true to herself and her music. The doubts that had plagued her moments before seemed distant, placed by a quiet satisfaction and a newfound sense of confidence. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a pause, a moment of shared acknowledgement. People looked at her with expressions of surprise and admiration, as if they had just discovered something extraordinary hidden in plain sight. She felt a mixture of relief and wonder, realizing that the simple act of playing music from her heart had touched others in ways she had never imagined. The experience left her changed, more aware of her own potential and the power of music to communicate emotions beyond words. She understood that even when underestimated or overlooked, her talent had always been real and capable of inspiring others. The quiet girl at the piano had begun to reveal herself to the world, one note at a time, and she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that could take her far beyond what she had ever dreamed. The part of the story that unfolded in that room would stay with her forever. It was a lesson in courage, in trusting her abilities, and in embracing the power of vulnerability. Through doubt, she had found clarity. Through nervousness, she had discovered confidence. And through a simple tune, she had begun to stun everyone who had ever underestimated her. As she continued to play, something remarkable began to happen. The simple tune she had been asked to play transformed into something much more beautiful and complex. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, gliding over the keys as though the piano itself were guiding her. The music no longer followed the constraints of a simple melody. It became a story, a tapestry of emotion, and a reflection of everything she had experienced in her quiet life. Each chord carried a piece of her soul, each note a whisper of her innermost thoughts. The audience was no longer just listening, they were feeling. People who had walked in casually, expecting nothing more than a pleasant background tune, were now captivated. Heads turned toward her, eyes widening in surprise. Conversations had ceased entirely, replaced by the sound of the piano and the unspoken awe of those listening. It was as if the room had become a sanctuary, held together by the music and that presence of this young woman who had so long remained unnoticed. She felt a thrill of exhilaration mixed with a hint of fear. She had never played like this in front of anyone before, and yet, somehow, the music seemed to flow effortlessly from her heart through her fingers. She allowed herself to become completely absorbed, trusting the notes to carry the emotions she could not put into words. Each variation she added made the melody richer, more expressive, more alive. The tune, once simple, now sang of longing, joy, sorrow, and hope all at once. As the performance grew more intense, she could feel the energy in the room shifting. People leaned in, drawn by the depth and beauty of what they were hearing. A few gasps escaped from those in the front rows, their faces showing disbelief. How could someone so quiet, so unassuming, create something so extraordinary? The contrast between her modest presence and the power of the music was striking. It was as if the piano itself were revealing a hidden truth about her that no one had noticed before. She remembered the countless hours spent practicing in solitude, the nights when she had pushed herself to perfect a passage, the moments of frustration when her fingers would not move as she wished. All of that effort, all of those private struggles, had led to this moment. She realized that every mistake, every stumble had shaped her into the musician she was becoming in that very instant. Her music was not just skill, it was experience, emotion, and heart combined into something that could touch others deeply. As the melody swelled, she began to experiment with dynamics, moving from soft, delicate passages to louder, more powerful chords. She allowed herself to pause in the middle, letting the silence speak as loudly as the notes themselves. The pauses were intentional, a way to draw the listeners further into the story she was telling. Each breath, each moment of stillness, made the next notes resonate even more profoundly. The audience was completely absorbed, hanging on every sound. She could see the effect on the crowd. Eyes were wide, some glistening with tears, some reflecting astonishment. People who had underestimated her, who had dismissed her quiet demeanor, were now forced to reconsider. She saw parents holding children who had stopped fidgeting, business people who had put down their phones, and teenagers who had stopped whispering to each other. Everyone was captivated, drawn in by the authenticity of her music. The realization that she could hold such attention, even temporarily, was both humbling and thrilling. Despite the growing intensity of her performance, she remained completely immersed in the music. She had learned long ago that distraction could kill the emotional impact of a piece. She focused entirely on the piano, letting her mind clear of doubts and self-consciousness. In this focused state, she was able to reach deeper into herself, drawing out notes and phrases that felt both spontaneous and inevitable. It was as though the music were speaking for her, communicating thoughts and feelings she could not express in any other way. As the piece progressed, she began to weave in subtle improvisations. Small flourishes, unexpected harmonies, and gentle shifts in tempo added layers of complexity. The tune became unpredictable in the most beautiful way, keeping the audience on edge, fascinated by each new turn. Even the most skeptical listeners could sense that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. She had taken a simple request and turned it into a living, breathing work of art, without even realizing the impact she was having. Her heart raced. Not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. She could feel a connection forming with each person in the room. The music was no longer just sound. It was a bridge between herself and the listeners, a silent conversation that bypassed words entirely. She sensed their emotions as they sensed hers, a mutual understanding that transcended ordinary experience. In that shared space, she was no longer the quiet, overlooked girl. She was a storyteller, a guide, a presence that could command attention and evoke deep feeling. The crescendo of the performance approached, and she felt a surge of energy. Her fingers flew over the keys, creating rapid sequences that were both precise and expressive. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the music. She could see people leaning forward, mouths slightly open, eyes locked on her hands as they moved effortlessly across the piano. The awe in their faces fueled her, giving her the courage to push further. To explore the full range of her abilities, she thought of the times she had played alone in her room, pouring every ounce of emotion into her music without anyone to witness it. Now all of that practice, all of that private devotion, was coming to life in front of others. The realization that her passion could touch people in such a profound way filled her with a mix of humility and exhilaration. She understood in that moment that her music was not meant to be hidden, that it could reach hearts and minds in ways she had only dreamed of. As the final notes of the piece approached, she allowed herself to slow, to draw out each chord with intention and care. The last few seconds were gentle, almost fragile, a soft landing after the intensity of the crescendo. She felt the music linger in the air, the echoes carrying the emotion long after the last note faded. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was collectively absorbing the beauty of what they had just witnessed. Then came the reaction. Applause erupted, spontaneous and genuine. Some people stood, others clapped vigorously, and a few could not hide their tears. She looked up, finally meeting the eyes of the audience, and saw expressions of awe, admiration, and surprise. People who had dismissed her, who had expected only a simple tune, were now witnessing a level of talent and emotional depth they had not anticipated. She felt a rush of gratitude and astonishment herself, realizing that she had truly stunned everyone in the room. In the quiet aftermath, as the applause subsided, she felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. She had taken a risk, played from her heart, and discovered that her music had the power to move others in ways she had never imagined. The nervousness that had plagued her before was replaced with a quiet confidence. She had not only performed, she had communicated something deeply personal and universal at the same time. People approached her afterward, some with tears in their eyes, some with wide smiles, expressing their admiration and wonder. They spoke of the beauty of her music, the emotion it conveyed, and the way it had transformed the atmosphere of the room. Even strangers felt a personal connection to her through the piano, a testament to the authenticity and power of her performance. She realized that this moment was not just about stunning the audience, it was about discovery. She had discovered her own ability to connect with others through her music, to transform a simple tune into an extraordinary experience. She had stepped beyond the shadows of doubt and obscurity, revealing a side of herself that had always been waiting to be seen. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that could carry her far. Beyond anything she had ever imagined, the room was still buzzing with the energy of what had just happened. People were talking in hushed tones, glancing back at the piano as if half expecting the magic to continue. She sat there for a moment, hands still hovering above the keys, heart racing, trying to process what she had just done. The performance had been more than she had imagined, and the reaction from the audience was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She felt a mixture of pride, relief, and disbelief. It was as if the room itself had changed. What had begun as a casual event, a simple request for a basic tune, had transformed into a moment that felt almost sacred. People who had underestimated her were now staring in awe, realizing that the quiet, unassuming girl they had dismissed could produce something so powerful and moving. The contrast between her unremarkable appearance and the extraordinary music she had created was striking, and it seemed to leave everyone speechless. Some approached her immediately, their expressions a mix of wonder and admiration. They spoke of how the music had touched them, how they had felt emotions they couldn't put into words. how the melody had lingered in their minds long after the last note faded. Their words were genuine, coming from people who had not expected to be moved at all. She listened, feeling a little overwhelmed, but also deeply gratified that her music had made such a connection. Others stood back, watching quietly, perhaps trying to reconcile the image of the shy, quiet girl with the powerful presence she had just displayed through her music. They whispered among themselves, voices low, as if they were discussing something sacred. Some shook their heads in disbelief, still struggling to comprehend how someone so unassuming could command such emotion and attention with a single instrument. She noticed the subtle changes in the audience. People who had been casual, chatting, or scrolling on their phones were now fully present. Their attention focused entirely on her. Even those who had been skeptical or dismissive could not deny the talent and emotion that had poured from her fingers. The room was filled with a quiet reverence, a shared recognition of something rare and extraordinary. Her mind raced with thoughts she had never considered before. Could this be the beginning of something new? Could her music reach beyond the quiet rooms of her home and touch more people? She had always loved playing, but she had never imagined that her talent could have such a profound effect on others. The realization was both exciting and a little frightening. It meant stepping into a world she had only dreamed of, a world where people truly recognized her abilities. As she looked around, she noticed the expressions on the faces of the people she had grown up around. Some were proud, some were surprised, and some seemed almost regretful for not having noticed her talent sooner. She understood their feelings, but she also realized that their recognition was not the reason she played. She played because it was part of who she was, because the music was her voice, her way of expressing what words could not. Still, the acknowledgement from others felt like a powerful affirmation, a validation she had never sought but now deeply appreciated. A few individuals approached with questions, curious about how she had learned to play, where her inspiration came from, and whether she had ever performed in public before. She answered quietly, modestly, feeling a little shy under the attention but also proud of the journey that had brought her here. Each question reminded her of the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, the dedication and perseverance that had gone unnoticed until now. She realized that those quiet moments had prepared her for this exact experience. Even if she had never known it, the organizers of the event came over, expressing their amazement and gratitude. They admitted that they had expected only a simple background melody, and what she had delivered far exceeded anything they could have imagined. They spoke of the impact her performance had on the atmosphere, on the people, and on the overall experience of the gathering. Their words were encouraging, and she felt a sense of pride mixed with humility. It was a moment of recognition that she had never sought, but now welcomed with quiet grace. Some people lingered, reluctant to leave, hoping for just a few more notes, a few more moments of the music that had captivated them. She smiled gently, understanding their desire, but she knew that the performance had reached its natural conclusion. The magic was in the experience, in the connection, in the way the music had moved hearts and minds. She had given them a glimpse of her world, and that was enough. As the crowd began to disperse, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The intensity of the performance had drained her physically, but the emotional fulfillment was unmatched. She realized that her music had the power not only to express her own emotions, but also to awaken something in others. It was a profound and humbling realization, one that left her both inspired and motivated. She thought about how different this moment was from her quiet practice sessions at home. In her room, the music was personal, intimate, and private. Here, it had become a shared experience, a way to communicate and connect with others. The contrast was striking, and she understood that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Her music could no longer be confined to the private spaces of her home. It had the potential to reach wider audiences, to inspire and move people in ways she had never imagined. Her confidence grew with each interaction, each compliment, each acknowledgement of her talent. She realized that she had always underestimated the impact her music could have on others. The doubts and insecurities that had plagued her in the past seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of purpose and possibility. She understood that her quiet dedication, her perseverance, and her love for the piano had brought her to this moment. and that the journey ahead held endless opportunities. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the long hours of practice and solitude to the moment she had taken a seat at the piano in the community center. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt had contributed to the depth and beauty of her performance. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of skill, emotion, and dedication that had allowed her to captivate the audience and leave a lasting impression. As the evening drew to a close, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The audience had been moved, inspired, and surprised, and she had discovered a new dimension of her own abilities. She understood that this moment was a turning point, a catalyst for future opportunities and experiences. The impact of her performance would linger, not only in the memories of those who had listened, but also in her own understanding of herself and her music. She knew that the journey ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had discovered a strength within herself, a resilience that would carry her forward. The music was not just a talent or a skill. It was a reflection of who she was, a source of inspiration, and a way to connect with others on a profound and meaningful level. In the quiet moments after the audience had left, she lingered by the piano, her fingers tracing the keys once more. The echoes of the performance filled the room, a reminder of the connection she had created and the impact she had made. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the music that had always been a part of her, and for the people who had witnessed and appreciated her talent. She realized that this experience had changed her, not only as a musician but as a person. The recognition, the admiration, and the awe of the audience had opened her eyes to the possibilities that lay ahead. She understood that her quiet dedication had the power to transform not only her own life, but also the lives of those who heard her music. It was a moment of revelation, a confirmation of her abilities, and a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things emerge from the most unexpected places. As she closed the piano and prepared to leave, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The experience had given her a glimpse of what was possible, and she knew that she would continue to pursue her music with even greater passion and commitment. The journey was far from over, but she had taken a significant step forward, and the impact of that step would continue to unfold in ways she could not yet imagine. The evening had begun as a simple request, a casual performance meant to fill the background of a gathering, yet it had become a moment of transformation, both for her and for the audience. She had discovered the power of her music, the depth of her talent, and the ability to move others in ways she had never anticipated. It was a turning point, a moment that would shape the path ahead and leave a lasting impression on everyone who had been fortunate enough to witness it. After that evening at the community center, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The performance had left a lasting impression on everyone who had been present, and word of her talent began to spread quietly at first, then more broadly. People who had only seen her as shy or ordinary now recognized a depth and ability they had never suspected. She received invitations to play at small gatherings, local events, and eventually more formal performances. Each opportunity built on the last, but she remained grounded, focused on the music itself rather than the attention it brought. She approached each new opportunity with a mix of excitement and humility. Performing in front of others was still a nerve-wracking experience, but the memory of the community center gave her courage. She understood that her music was not just for herself anymore. It could touch hearts, evoke emotions, and create connections she had never imagined possible. This understanding transformed the way she approached her practice, her preparation, and her performances. Each note carried intention, each phrase carried emotion, and each performance became an opportunity to communicate something meaningful. Her family and close friends watched this transformation with a mixture of surprise and pride. They had always known she was talented, but seeing the way others responded to her music opened their eyes to the full extent of her abilities. They encouraged her gently, offering support without pushing or imposing expectations. Their belief in her, combined with her own growing confidence, allowed her to pursue her passion with renewed determination. She understood that this journey was hers to shape. She embraced it fully. The invitations began to expand beyond her local community. People who had heard about her performance at the community center reached out, curious to experience her music firsthand. She received opportunities to perform at cultural events, charity functions, and even small concert venues. With each performance, she grew more comfortable, more expressive, and more aware of the impact her music had on others. She learned to read an audience, to sense the emotions in the room, and to adapt her playing to create the most meaningful experience possible. Despite the growing recognition, she remained true to herself in her approach to music. She never played for fame or validation. Her motivation remained rooted in the love of music and the desire to share emotion and story through her playing. This authenticity resonated with audiences, creating a deep and lasting connection. People were drawn not just to her technical skill, but to the honesty and vulnerability in her performances. They felt that each note was a reflection of her heart, and this connection made her music unforgettable. She continued to practice diligently, honing her skills and expanding her repertoire. She explored new styles, experimented with improvisation, and studied the works of musicians she admired. Each new challenge strengthened her ability to express herself,